The League of Women Voters is a national, nonpartisan organization established to encourage citizen participation in government. It never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. The following program is brought to you by the League of Women Voters of the Grand Rapids area.
Hello, and welcome to the 1991 Grand Rapids Mayoral Candidates Forum. This program is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of the Grand Rapids area, GRTV, and WYCE Radio. The two candidates for mayor of Grand Rapids are John H. Logie and P. Robert Vanderson. If you have a question that you would like posed to either of these candidates, you may call 459-4881. And now, to introduce the participants and go over the rules, is the Executive Director of the Citizens League, Beth Vanstra.
Good evening and welcome to the City of Grand Rapids Mayoral Forum, sponsored by GRTV, WYCE, and the League of Women Voters. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'd like to begin by introducing our participants this evening. First of all, our two candidates for mayor of the City of Grand Rapids, John Logie and Bob Vanderson, who will be responding to questions from our panel of media and citizen representatives. Allow me to introduce that panel right now. Our first panelist is Suzanne Jiha, newswoman at WOTV. Our second panelist is Jim Lawrence, reporter with WCUZ Radio. Our third panelist is Amber Viverka, who is a reporter with the Grand Rapids Business Journal. And our final panelist is Mary Seymour, representative of the League of Women Voters, who will be asking questions from our studio audience and viewers and listeners at home. At this time, I'd like to remind our viewers at home and our listeners that they can call in throughout this hour any questions they have. The phone number is 459-4881. We'll be repeating that throughout the evening, but mark it down. It's 459-4881. Let me briefly explain the format for the evening. Each panelist will be allowed to ask a question, and the candidates will take turns in answering first. They will both be allowed a 2-minute response. Questioners may ask one follow-up question, to which the candidates may take a minute to respond. At the end of the evening, each candidate will be given 2 minutes for a closing statement and final remarks. With that accomplished, let's begin the questioning, and we'll begin with Suzanne Jiha, who will ask the first question of John Logie.
Thank you, Beth. Gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to question you in this public forum. My first question for you, Mr. Logie, is running government requires more of a professional now than ever before, really, in the history of government. You have to be a politician, a diplomat, an economics specialist, an engineer, a planner, a banker, a real estate specialist. Running the second largest city in the state of Michigan obviously is no easy task, especially as we move in this decade, this competitive decade. Is it enough to say, without political experience previously, that I'm a lawyer and I can do the job?
Well, Suzanne, I'm not sure there's anybody out there that would fit all of those characteristics, and I'm glad to say that we have a good city administration with expertise in many of those areas. But I think that it isn't enough to say that you're any one thing as far as being able to look the people in the eye and say, I believe I'm qualified to be mayor. But the key to my candidacy, I think, is the experience that I have had working with city government, having chaired 4 commissions for this city, having written 2 ordinances for the city and represented the city, and then represented individuals and property owners and people who've had problems with City Hall. I believe that it is a unique set of experiences that have given me a good set of qualifications so that if I become the mayor of this city, that I will have a chance to get started immediately on the city's problems and working with the other qualified people in City Hall, begin to address them.
Bob, would you answer the same?
She asked it of an attorney.
I'm going to ask it of a businessman. Is it enough to say I'm a businessman, I can run the second largest city without having previous political experience?
Yes, I think it is. we do not have to run the city government by ourselves. Either one of us, whoever becomes mayor, will have the help of 6 other city commissioners. We will have the help of the city manager and staff. With all the people you described in asking about this job, I could not fit the bill in all of those, and I don't think anyone could. So there's a lot of help to be had. I make decisions every day by myself. I'm used to making decisions. I have to make good decisions. If I didn't, I wouldn't be a businessman for very long. So I feel that I'm well qualified to make decisions for the city of Grand Rapids. I think my business knowledge would do me well in being mayor of the city.
Thank you, Bob. Our second questioner, Jim Lawrence, and you will ask a question of Bob Vanderson.
Thank you, Beth. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Toss-up question for 20 points. If elected mayor, will you sign a Gay Pride Day proclamation? And if not, why not?
The first press conference that I held 4 or 5 months ago when I announced that I was candidate for the mayor of Grand Rapids, I had that question asked me. Maybe you asked it. It was the last question that I had opened up the period for. I answered that I would do the same as what Mayor Helmut has done in the past. I think he has done right, and I would follow in his footsteps in that respect. I believe that by opening up a Gay Pride Day, we can start with every group that comes along and have the same thing. Pretty soon, days become meaningless. So I believe I would just go along with the present policy. In fact, I'm sure I would.
Mr. Logie, same question.
Jim, this question has been asked before, and we've had a chance to answer it, and my view hasn't changed since my earlier statement. I'm not entirely sure that it is a proper use of the proclamation process, but I'm not going to let my answer just stand on that. I do want to answer the question directly. I believe that when you have a controversial group like this, and in a city like Grand Rapids it is a controversial group, that what it needs to do is to seek the support and endorsement of a broad-based group of people in this community. And until I see that it has that kind of support among a broad number of the city commissioners, among a broad number of the citizens, I'm not prepared to issue a proclamation.
Thank you both. Third question from Amber Viverka, and she will start with John Logie.
Good evening.
Good evening.
In light of dwindling state assistance to Grand Rapids and fewer local income tax receipts, would you advocate cutting any present city services or programs? And if you would, which ones?
The source of the city's revenue is a real concern, and it should be to all of us in this community. The federal government's participation in local government over the last 10 years has dropped 10%. In 1980, we were getting about 17% of our money from the federal government. We're now getting less than 6%. And of course, Governor Englander has, with his programs of 9.2 across-the-board cuts earlier this year and the most recent vetoes, sent a clear message to all of us that there just are not state dollars like there were in the past. But I'm not prepared to say at this point as a candidate that I've identified a specific area where something can be cut. I think this city runs quite efficiently. It is running on a balanced budget. I think it's got good people working very hard. What I think we're going to have to do is find new and innovative ways to reach out into the community, to get more support from the community so that we continue to maintain the kind and level of services that we enjoy. That is why I have, on earlier occasions, announced a proposal called the Church Corps to try to get all of the churches in the city actively involved, to have an ongoing cooperative project with city government and the churches. That's one approach to trying to put people involve people in what's going on in the city. I think that's very, very important, and I'm very glad to say that I've already received a positive response on that one from the Grand Rapids Area Council on Ecumenism and their executive director, who has written to me to say that he thinks that that's a good idea and one that the churches in this community will endorse. So I think we're going to have to find those kind of innovative ways to address city problems, because we are going to see fewer dollars.
Thank you, John. Bob Vanderson, the same question.
First of all, I have proposed a couple of weeks ago that we have what I call a budget task force. In other words, we get the mayor and the commissioner, we get the city manager and staff, we get 2 people from the private sector, we get 2 from the county commission, and 2 from the Board of Education. And we sit down and we take a good look at the city budget. We take a good look at the county budget. We take a good look at the Board of Education budget. I think between the 3 of them, we'll find that some of the services overlap, that we can find causes where we can show that by working together, we can reduce some of the costs of the city. Also, I've been a proponent of getting businesses to come into Grand Rapids. We get the city income tax from the employees, which would help our budget problems. We do have some budget problems. It's a balanced budget, but only because we are pushing things into the future that should be done today. And I think we have to take a very careful look at that. As a businessman, I believe that this is where I would be very effective. Taking a look at budgets, I've had to make out plenty. I've had to stick with them. I know what they're all about, and I think I can be very useful in that department.
Thank you, Bob. Let's move to our next panelist, Mary Seymour, and she will ask a question of Bob Vanderson first.
Okay. Do you support the Metro Council? If so, what role will it play in the future of Grand Rapids?
Well, the first part's very easy. I do support Metro Council. I've said that from when I started my campaign. However, there's a little wrinkle in Metro Council right now, as we all know. The city of Wyoming has voted to get out of Metro Council. They are out of it, and which I think hurts. I really do. I sincerely wish that they had stayed in it. I think there's a lot of area-wide planning that has to be done. I think Metro Council is the tool to do this. I believe that the people in Metro Council have the expertise to guide us. I know that Mayor Deems from East Grand Rapids, who is chairman, has worked very hard on this, and I would hope he continues. I just hope that the Metro Council works well without Wyoming in there, and that we can overcome that because it is desperately needed.
Thank you, Bob. John Logie, same question.
Well, I'm happy to say that here's an issue that I don't think the viewers and the voters are going to find much difference, because Mr. Vanderson and I are of a like mind. The city of Grand Rapids is sort of a guinea pig with this Metropolitan Council process. And I think we're one of the best places to give it a try, because you look at some of the area-wide problems that we have, whether we're talking about the sewage overflow problem or the idea of area-wide recycling, which I am firmly in support of, and the trash pickup problem that we have. You look at our roads generally and the interaction of them as they move in and out of the different municipalities, and the whole problem of public transportation. I think that the Metropolitan Council offers us an opportunity to begin to address these problems correctly on an area-wide basis. I think there's a real opportunity that we can eliminate some redundancy, eliminate some waste, and even stimulate some economic development. I am convinced that the Metro Council can be our servant and not, as some people have suggested, be our master. Their powers are limited. Our cooperation, that is the City of Grand Rapids cooperation, is absolutely essential, and it's voluntary. If in fact we find that this council does not or is not serving us well, we have the power, like the City of Wyoming, to withdraw our support. So I'm looking forward to working with that group, to working with the people from Grand Rapids who will be participating on that Metropolitan Council, and I'm quite frankly optimistic that we can begin to address some of our area-wide problems in new and unique ways, and the solutions then will be better for all of the citizens in this area.
Thank you both. Back to Suzanne Geha for the next question.
If I may, I'm going to do a follow-up to Mary's question about Metro Council. Mr. Logie gets this.
John Logie first, yes.
Mr. Logie, since Wyoming has decided not to be a party to Metro Council, and Wyoming is no small city, it's a major force here in Kent County, how can Metro Council act effectively without needing to bypass Wyoming with regard to roads, transportation, water and sewer, and other things that it will not maybe be able to cooperate with because Wyoming is not party to it?
Well, Suzanne, I think you need to understand that just because Wyoming is not participating in the Metro Council does not mean that Wyoming, the city, cannot actively participate in the kinds of programs that the Metro Council itself is creating, proposing, and promoting. And my hope, quite frankly, is that those programs will be popular enough among the people throughout the metropolitan area that the city of Wyoming will want to participate in good, well-planned regional programs that can and should include them, and that over time they may begin to see the value of what is going on there and rethink their decision not to participate.
Mr. Vanderson, how do you think it can be effective, Metro Council, without a major municipality like Wyoming being a part of it?
I really believe that Wyoming will cooperate with the Metro Council. I think the problem in Wyoming, the concept of the council wasn't to their liking. I believe they felt that the council had too many powers. They were afraid of the powers that the council, that they could levy taxes, that they could condemn property. They were, I think they were more concerned than they really had to be. I would have hoped they stayed in it. I think Mayor Voorhees, and I've talked to him, I believe that his concept of the council was that it was another layer of government, that the powers were there that he did not like, that actually was over the powers that he had. And I really believe that in the long run, Wyoming will cooperate with the council. They almost have to. They're depending on us just as we are dependent on them.
If I may have a follow-up, would that go to Mr. Vanderson or Mr. Logie?
You may do both, but they only get a minute to respond.
Each, okay. My follow-up, then I'll do Mr. Vanderson first, is, if my memory serves me, it was rejected by about a margin of 2-1. So it's an overwhelming rejection of Metro Council. Yes, the taxation issue was a major issue, but we see Wyoming be really living or moving to a different drummer. At the same time, it is building its own water pipeline than the rest of the area. So we see a history here of it going in one direction and several other townships and municipalities and so on going in. How are you going to bring it together? What is it going to take, or does it really matter? Can Wyoming be off separately and the rest of Kent County on its own?
I would really like to see it all work together, Wyoming with the rest of the county.
Will it work without Wyoming, though?
I believe it will, yes, I believe it will. We are going to have to eliminate a few things that might concern Wyoming. Wyoming has, like you mentioned, has always been that way. I think one of the jobs of the mayor of Grand Rapids will be to offer an olive branch to Wyoming so that we can communicate, so that we can work together. And I think it's going to take a lot of work.
Mr. Logie, can Metro be effective? Can it really operate with Wyoming? And is it really a miscalculation to think at some point Wyoming's going to jump on the bandwagon when it clearly is not showing an interest in doing so?
Well, actually, Suzanne, I don't think you gave the Wyoming voters quite enough credit. If my memory serves me, their vote was 88% against the Metropolitan Council in the election that they held this summer. So there obviously is a very, very strong feeling in that community at this point that they don't want to participate. However, that fact does not change my answer. I believe the way to bring Wyoming into the circle of communities that is involved is to show them that there is enough value to them in the programs that are being proposed and then enacted around them. Because part of my answer to you is yes, indeed, I believe the Metro Council can function efficiently for this metropolitan area, even though Wyoming is not participating, and function better with Wyoming inside once they see that we're doing the positive kind of things that we need to do.
Thank you both. I believe we're going to take a very short break, and we'll be back in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks.
Yeah, 30 seconds I'll get to you.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Jerry Helmholt. I've been the mayor of Grand Rapids for the past 8 years. On November 5, you'll be electing a new mayor, as well as a city commissioner. It's extremely important that you look at the news, watch their literature, and make a decision as to who will be the best individuals to lead this city in the future. Be sure you vote on November 5.
And before I could vote, I first had to be registered with the city clerk's office.
Deadline to register is 30 days before an
Because I
election.
turned 18 2 days before the registration
I registered at the Secretary of State's
And then I had
office.
this accident, which almost made me get an absentee.
With one of the city's volunteer deputy registrars. The polls were open all day, so I came
in the
down.
morning till 8 at night.
That sure was easy.
I'm ready. Welcome back, and we'll continue our questioning of our two mayoral candidates, John Logie and Bob Vanderson. Jim Lawrence from WCUZ will ask the first question of Bob Vanderson.
Thank you, Beth. To stop beating up on the fine citizens of the city of Vision and Progress, Wyoming is not the only city that's decided, or township for that matter, to opt out of the Metro Council, in some cases by a vote of the people. We've heard varying descriptions tonight from the people in Wyoming who apparently fear a Metro Council that's too powerful. Mr. Logie, you referred to a Metro Council that's voluntary and only has limited powers. What is the Metro Council, and is it enough to overcome the various regional differences that historically have kept cities and townships from cooperating with each other?
Well, I think that we cannot foretell the future. We don't know what will happen with the Metro Council, if it's strong enough to hold together or if it isn't. I said all along, I support the Metro Council. If it does well, it will survive, obviously. If it doesn't do very well, it won't survive. But to forecast the future of the Metro Council is very difficult. It depends on how well they can talk to the various communities, how well they can communicate to us, to the other ones that are in the council. If they can communicate, if they can show that cooperation saves us, cooperation is the best for the city of Grand Rapids and the surrounding areas, I think they will survive. I think they'll do a good job. But if they don't, we'll find out what happens very shortly.
Thank you, Bob. John Logie, same question.
The legislation that created the Metropolitan Council was introduced by our two local senators, Senator Posthumus and Senator Ehlers, and I know both of them, and I think that they are not people who are going to propose and promote legislation, get it through the Lansing people, get the governor to sign it if they think it doesn't have any purpose or doesn't have any good behind it. The membership cost is 0.2 of a mil. If, in fact, they want to raise taxes, they have to have a vote of the people in the whole Metropolitan Council area that they're going to try to raise the tax from, and then they're limited to only 0.5 mil. So I really think that there are legitimate controls in place for this. You know, we have 628 elected officials in Kent County alone, not counting school boards. We've got a huge amount of government already here. I'm an optimist. I think of that TV ad about try it, you'll like it. I think that sums up the way I feel about the Metropolitan Council. Let's try it. We might like it. It's going to be okay.
Beth, if I could follow up,
Sure you may.
kind of taking it the other way, West Michigan, the Grand Rapids area in particular, is a growth area right now, population-wise, for the state of Michigan, for most of the upper Midwest, for that matter. Obviously, things are working pretty well here, even though we supposedly have this lack of cooperation between the various governments. Going the other way, then, why do we need a Metro Council?
Ben, why don't you start?
Is that to me? Oh,
Ben
okay.
first and then Beth.
Well, I think the kinds of things that I was talking about before, but let me add a couple. We do have 4 pipelines coming into the city of Grand Rapids, the metropolitan area right now. My kind of feeling is that the second, third, and fourth of those have sort of been on a thumb-your-nose basis to everybody else. That's not regional planning. If that's the right number of water lines from Lake Michigan right now, it's only by happenstance and chance. I look at the situation where we don't have jobs. We have jobs outside the city, we have workers inside the city, and no way to get the two together. I think regional planning for public transit and mass transit is the kind of thing that needs to get done.
Ben?
I have to agree with you, Jim. I think we're doing all right now. But I think we could do better. And I think this is what the Metro Council is all about. Like John just said, the amount of pipelines we have here, we have mass transit problems. I think we have to face these problems together, not alone. This can go on as long as we don't grow too much. But if we grow as we're expected to grow in this area, we better plan together, because there's much planning to be done. We have airports, we have mass transit, we have any number of things that should be worked out together. Water, sewer, you name it. So I believe that we are getting along all right, but we could do much, much better with cooperation.
Thank you. Amber Vaverka, begin questioning with John Logie.
How should the city promote economic development within its own borders, especially if the state discontinues the tax abatement program that is presently used to keep businesses within the city?
Well, I've heard the same rumor, Amber, that you have about the tax abatements, and of course, if the state does away with them, they're presumably going to do away with them for everybody. In other words, the city of Grand Rapids won't be able to offer that incentive, nor will any other adjacent or even other areas in the state. I think that would be a mistake, because I think that the tax abatement program in this city has been a boon to the city of Grand Rapids. I think the number that I saw was something like 338 of those that have helped add thousands of jobs back into the city of Grand Rapids that we otherwise might have lost. But I think that we've got other resources in this community, other strengths. I think that our skilled workforce is one of the things that we haven't done a good enough job to promote. You know, going all the way back to the furniture industry and how it got developed in this city, and bringing it forward to office furniture and all the tool and die shops and everything. We've got a wonderfully talented group of people here. One of the things that I want to do as the mayor of the city is to promote that kind of idea, because I know from my own experience helping businesses locate here, which I have done as an attorney, that they come into this area and they look at that workforce and they say, that's really what we want. We want people that we can train to do high technology type of work. We want people that are hardworking and dedicated and low absenteeism, low sickness rate. The people in this community are already our major resource. And I think the leadership in Grand Rapids has to figure out the ways to sell that to the outside world so they can come here. I also feel that we do have unused buildings, empty buildings that the city can promote and try to find people to use them, and should, as another device to try to keep that economic well-being going.
Thank you, John. Bob Anderson, same question.
I am on record as being for tax abatement. I've been to our Economic Development Office, talked to the gentlemen who operate that office. They've used tax abatements very successfully in Grand Rapids for several years. This has done much for not only getting businesses to locate here, but also keeping existing businesses in Grand Rapids. Now, tax abatements may come to an end, but there's another plan that will be taking its place. But this plan will probably only be for blighted areas. So it'll be a little different plan. There's also a tax abatement plan for citizens, for homeowners, that if you improve your property, that you can keep the assessed valuation the same as it was before until the home is sold. This is a plan from 1977. I think it's called the Matthew Gast Act. So there is another tax abatement, or a type of tax abatement, that we can use for citizens as well as for businesses. And I think the Office of Economic Development has done a fine job with this. But if it comes to an end, we'll have to make sure that we help businesses to come into Grand Rapids. We have to have land available. Land in Grand Rapids, a lot of it has to be cleared, which is expensive. Cleanup is expensive. So we have to have programs to keep businesses from leaving Grand Rapids and going to where they have open fields and easy places to build.
Thank you both. Amber, a follow-up?
Yes, you both talked about attracting businesses here and rehabbing old buildings, old spaces. Where will we get the money to do that? Should the city be putting some public dollars into retention efforts within the city limits? And I'm assuming here tax abatements are no more. What else can the city offer?
Bob first, and then John, please.
Well, as a businessman, I would like to show people who are interested in Grand Rapids that you can develop a business here. 14 years ago, I started a business here, and it's been successful. So I think, as a business person, I'd like to talk to these people, show them Grand Rapids is a super place to have a business. I believe there are other ways that we can help. We can help with land. There's a lot of vacant land that is not being used that we can steer these people towards. Now, there's not a lot of 10-acre sites. There's no question about that, but smaller sites over by Old Southfield, there's railroad siding, there are sites there that can be used. And we'll just have to help people get into those sites, help them get established. And I think these are things we are already doing without tax abatement. The Right Place program is an example.
Thank you, Bob. John Logie, same question.
The largest landowner in the city of Grand Rapids is the city of Grand Rapids. One way or another, we have acquired a huge amount of property, some of it by tax default, some of it by outright purchase, some of it by condemnation. Even if we lose the tax abatement process, which is the basis of your question, I believe that the city has the potential to sell that land on an incentive basis. I think we've got to take a very long-range view. And if we can stimulate a new business coming in to set up its business, to build a plant on vacant land, to rehab an old building, or if necessary, to tear down an old building and then build new. The city can afford, I think most people are familiar with the concept of a land contract, buying property on land contract, a little money down, and then payment over years. That's one way that the city can help.
Thank you. Moving to Mary Seymour and begin with John Logie.
Okay, I'm going to consolidate two phone-in questions because we are running short of time. How would each of you candidates handle curbside pickup of recyclable materials, and would privatization Thank you. Be a way of handling this and other city services?
John, begin, please.
That is a tongue twister.
Yes.
Isn't it, Mary? Privatization. Let me answer that part first and come back to the first one. I believe that the trash hauling system that we have in the city of Grand Rapids right now is a good one. When I first moved back into the Heritage Hill area over 22 years ago, there was no municipal pickup. We had to hire a private trash hauler if we could, and there were a lot of people in that neighborhood who couldn't. And so the trash pickup wasn't uniform. We had all kinds of problems. And I believe that when you've got a good system with hardworking and dedicated people, you keep that system. So I'm not in favor of suddenly turning that over. The privatization would be obviously letting the private sector move into that particular area. I am in favor of the area-wide recycling process because I think that that's going to do two things. Number one, it is going to put us on a more environmentally correct footing about that major issue for years to come. And quite frankly, if we can provide area-wide recycling pickup, we will cut down dramatically on the amount of trash that we then have to burn or haul to landfills. So there's sort of a two-for-one benefit. As I think you know, the county is already working on that in a kind of test market area, and as the mayor of this city, I definitely want to support that and promote that happening on a citywide basis, because I believe the people in Grand Rapids are indeed concerned both ways. That is, they're concerned that things are picked up and taken care of, and they want it done in an environmentally acceptable way.
Thank you, Jen. Bob Anderson, same question.
I have to agree that after checking over our city services, I feel that we are doing our pickups in a cost-effective way. I think we can always improve. There's always room for improvement. But getting into privatizing something like garbage pickup, if we start this and it is not effective and we sell all our equipment and then we have to go back and repurchase everything and start all over again because privatizing wasn't the right thing to do, we are in big trouble. When talking to city unions, talking to city employees, frankly, they seem to be good people. They want to cooperate with the city, and I'm all for that. If there comes a time when we feel that something is more cost effective than the way we are doing it, I believe we should look into it. I've said when I started this that I did not want to put any employees out of a job. I still feel that way, and I will work to that end. As far as curbside recycling, we are already trying a little of that. I think we must do it. We have to do separations. And I think that as time goes on, we will do more and more of it. It's a must. It is coming. Let's face it. We're going to be doing it.
Can I just have one follow-up? I didn't get it specifically. How would you handle that curbside pickup of recyclable materials?
You mean with the city employees, or how exactly, with bagging, or?
Yes, or just centers to where it could be picked up.
Well, there are various methods you could do it. You can have the city employees come along and truck it, or you can have places, centers where you can dispose of it. I think this would have to be looked into. Whatever is cost effective and whatever is convenient to our citizens. I think we owe something to our citizens of convenience. They expect that as city government, and I think we should give it to them. However, we also have to watch cost. I'm very cost conscious, as you can tell.
John?
I think the key is, and the opportunity that we have here is that this is an example of a metropolitan problem. I don't want to see us just pick up recyclable materials in the city of Grand Rapids. I want to see us do this on an area-wide basis. So here's an opportunity for city and county government to work together. I do believe that if we can find a cost-effective way to do it, that we should do it right at the curbside, right in front of the house. That should be the goal, and we ought to try to make that happen.
Before we take one more short break, I'd like to remind our viewers at home and our listeners at home that the phone number to call in your questions is 459-4881, and maybe they can do it while we take this short break. Thank you.
vote America. In my dreams, I take a stand. Oh, vote America. I feel the power in my head. I say, vote America.
It's your turn. It's your time. Take a stand. Vote.
Oh, feel the power.
Feel the power. Vote, America.
What are you doing here? Sorry. Hey, change the channel, my friend. I'm sure you can find some old Andy of Mayberry down there, or maybe some MTV up there. Oh, Cosby's on, your favorite. Go away. Run along. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. They gone? They gone? Now that all the pencil necks are gone, it's just us really hip people. Welcome to GRTV, where you find innovative, creative, cutting-edge video. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, if you don't like what you see on GRTV, you can always come down and produce your own.
Welcome back. We will resume our questioning now of our mayoral candidates with Suzanne Jiha asking Bob Vanderson the first question.
Mr. Vanderson, there are groups who over a period of years have been pushing hard and really think this is the time for a stadium, to spend millions of dollars to build a stadium and convention center. Given the huge cuts in social services that are facing the state of Michigan and the increase in human needs, would you back a stadium at this time when the number of homeless, the unemployed, those without health insurance is growing? Is this the time?
Well, first of all, I think we have to work on our homeless problem, obviously. This is a problem that has faced us for quite a while. Obviously, with the cut in funding, it has worsened. And I think we should address that first of all. But I would encourage, even at this time, that the private sector, and I say private sector, look into a convention center stadium. I've always said I want the stadium downtown, not out on 92nd or 110th Street, but I want it downtown. I think it just helps the core city of Grand Rapids. It's something we've needed for years. As far as the convention center, we now have Myers and Gordon Foods in the Grand Center with their food fairs. They've already outgrown these facilities. So I think we ought to move forward. We ought to take a look at it. I would encourage the private sector to do this with minimal city help. Now, if it comes to city land, I'd be more than willing to help them with that. But I think both can be accomplished. Both can be accomplished now. We also have to involve the private sector with the homeless. At the last forum, I had heard that Calvin College had open dorms there. So I had called Mr. Diekman, president of Calvin, and asked if this was true, and it wasn't. But we have to look for places for the homeless. I have other ideas in helping the homeless too. That was part of the question.
Thank you, Bob. John Logie.
Suzanne, I think the question does divide in two. I think that the spending priorities of the city government should, in fact, be focused on kind of a worst first approach where need is greatest. And you asked specifically about one of the ones that concerns me deeply. I think you measure the quality of a city, its life, by how it deals with the least of its citizens. And I think the goal of this city should be that there really aren't any homeless people. And I know that sounds like a pipe dream, and that's not what I really mean by it. What I mean is, let's set a goal that every person that resides in this city has a sheltered bed for the night. And then at least we work at getting there. Sure, there's room for an arena in downtown Grand Rapids, and like my opponent, I feel that the private sector can and should take the initiative right now to start to make that happen. But I want to see something else happen at the same time. We have spent years and a lot of city money acquiring a lot of land, which we are now using very successfully for the Gus lot, for a lot of people that work in downtown who can park in that lot and then be bused from that lot to their places of business. It was slow to get that off the ground. But my understanding is that it is a very, very successful program now. So I want to add a little twist on it and say to these private sector developers, let's make sure when we take up some of that land for an arena that we rebuild or build underground and ramp around it so those parking spaces are still there. Because the 9 to 5 people in this community really can and do need them. So it's kind of like we used to say about, can we have guns and butter at the same time at the federal level? Yes, I think we can, because the city government's got to do the one and the private sector has to take the lead on the other.
Thank you both. Jim Lawrence, begin the questioning with John Logie.
Thank you, Beth. In a day and age, gentlemen, when we're cutting help to social agencies, as Suzanne alluded to, and kicking the so-called able-bodied off general assistance, and cities are routinely hard up for cash because state and federal help is all but dried up, as both of you have alluded to, is it worth considering that perhaps we can suspend Public Act 198 tax breaks for a year or two and get business to pay their full fair share of taxes to help out in a pinch?
Jim, I want to make sure I understand your question. Are you saying that as to those businesses that are now receiving that break,
yes,
you want us to step in and maybe they've got 4, 5, 8 years to run, cut them off? No, I don't
suspend them for a year or two.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't think that that would be fair. In other words, that is in the nature of a contractual agreement between the city and the property owner who improved that property in reliance on that commitment. And obviously, if he did his job right, he made his own analysis of how he could afford to do that, banking on the ability to have that abatement. I think we've got to place the emphasis elsewhere. And let me give you one specific example. You talked about the problems with social agencies. I think we've got to come up with new programs that reach out into the community in ways that we haven't done before. That's why I want to add another program tonight to the list that I've already been building of something that I'm calling a senior ombudsman. This will be a voluntary position created in cooperation with senior advocacy groups to receive calls at the Citizen Action Center and provide information on property tax matters, on public transit, on pharmaceutical drug rebates, grandparents' rights, and other issues of importance to senior citizens. Many people are not able to enjoy the benefits in these programs because they don't understand them, don't know they are eligible, or can't fight their way through the paperwork. I want to change that and ensure that when it comes to dealing with City Hall and the City Hall bureaucracy, senior citizens will have a direct contact with the mayor's office and therefore get things done.
Thank you, John. Bob.
With the tax abatements that are already in place, I cannot see cutting them off. This has been an agreement worked out between the private sector and the city. These tax abatements can be revoked. They can be revoked if the private sector has not kept up with the promises that they made the city when they received these abatements. However, this is checked into periodically by our Economic Development Office so that this does not happen. They must keep up with the agreement that they gave the city. And the city must keep up with the agreement that they gave the private sector. However, we have to involve the private sector more in some of our problems. I think this will help. Where funding is low, we need help from the private sector. I don't think forming more committees and more committees and more committees solve problems. I think the direct approach, which I've used all my life, will solve a lot of these problems. Being mayor, I feel, is a hands-on job, and I will keep it that way. That's the type of mayor I want to be.
Thank you both. I think we have time for one more question. We'll move to Amber, and you begin with Bob Anderson. Amber.
You both said that working with neighborhoods, strengthening the relationship between the city and the neighborhoods is a top priority. Is there some way that the city, the mayor and the city commission should be working differently with neighborhood associations than they are now?
Well, I think that we can always improve on anything we are doing. When I started my campaign several months ago, I sent a letter to 25 or 26 neighborhood associations offering to talk with them to find out what their problems were. I think this is part of the job of the commission, part of the job of the mayor of Grand Rapids. And I would be more than willing to do it. When you meet with these people, you certainly get grassroots problems. And I think these are the problems that we have to solve first. I can't recall exactly how many of these neighborhood associations that I have met with so far, but it's been quite a few. And I've learned a lot from them. I've learned a lot about police protection. I've learned a lot about crime in the neighborhoods, boarding up buildings, you name it. They've hit us with just about everything that goes on in the neighborhood. I think it's very healthy to have the input of neighborhood associations. I would work hard to see that they succeed. If they wanted to start new ones in different areas, I as mayor would be very, very supportive. Also of block clubs, which I think can really help with our crime prevention.
Thank you, Bob. John Logie.
Well, Amber, I didn't have to start learning about neighborhood associations when I became a candidate for office. One of the first things that I got involved in when I came back to Grand Rapids 23 years ago was the creation of one of the first neighborhood associations in this city, the Heritage Hill Neighborhood Association. And for 15 years, I was active in that association as a member and board member and president, and I acted as their unpaid legal counsel and did things that you have to do from the inside of one of those associations to get it up and running and to help make it work and help it succeed, although it's an ongoing problem. One of the key events during those 15 years was the 5 years that I spent involved in the target area program and as the chairman of that council for the city. And I watched the city in 1980 come in and take back the responsibility to make spending decisions with community development block grant funds, to the point where the $4.4 million that the city gets today, $840,000 of it stays in City Hall. You ask, what can we do? We can empower those neighborhoods. We can give them power back. That's number one. And number two, we can build bridges between them. I've now gone out as part of this campaign and visited with them at their various buildings, wherever they're operating, homes in various cases, and talked to the people that are trying to run these neighborhood associations, and they're all operating in a vacuum. They aren't being helped to interact with each other or interact correctly with City Hall. So I think there's a huge resource there in our neighborhood associations that is not being used correctly, that is not being used to build strength in those neighborhoods so people will want to stay there and want that neighborhood to persevere. I believe the city can do a much better job than it's doing in that area.
Thank you both. It seems like an hour goes way too fast, and we have just enough time to allow each candidate their closing statement. They each get 2 minutes, and we'll begin with John Logie, going alphabetically, and then Bob Vanderson will finish up.
Well, thank you, Beth, and I do want to thank Mary and the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity to address these issues. Running for mayor really means what it says. We've been literally running, haven't we? And are going to keep doing so for the next 2 weeks. I want to go back into history and tell you a little bit about what has shaped me to date. First, there's my dad, who is a well-loved surgeon in this community. He's 80 now, and he could probably still take out your appendix. Second is my mom, who read and read and read to me. She's the reason why I can't pass a used book sale to this day, but we lost her to cancer when I was 13. Third, there's my wife, Susie, and my 3 kids, who are a constant source of pride and happiness. And fourth, there are things like movies, like where Jimmy Stewart, quote, did the right thing. Fifth, there's the Navy, where I served for 5 years, both in the Destroyer Navy and the Pacific. and teaching at Annapolis. And sixth, there's the law, the business that I've been in for the last 23 years, which I felt as a brand new lawyer and still feel today is still a process of helping people to get justice. Through it all, the big thing that stuck with me was the word democracy. I believe in it and the power of government to help provide a better life for people. A lot of people have asked me why I'm running for this office, and let me share just one of the reasons I've given. I've given it to high school students. What I've said to them is that I hope that when they get to be my age, they will feel the same way about this city that I do right now. They will feel the same way about having raised their children, and they will feel the same way about the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John Logie. And Bob Anderson, your final statement.
I believe John and I have been together so much that we actually agree on a few things. It's hard to believe, but we do. We have been running. 2 weeks from now, the running will be over. 2 weeks from now, you'll have your chance to make your decision. I just want to thank GRTV tonight. I want to thank Beth for moderating, Suzanne, Jim, Amber, and Mary, and your questions were good. Different questions than what we've been answering, and I appreciate that. I think it helps both of us express our views and opinions. I think the challenges that the city faces today are many and complex. It will require the right type of person, the right type of leadership, if Grand Rapids is going to be able to respond to those challenges. In an article in the Grand Rapids Press of September 8, both Mayor Helmholt and Executive Director of the Citizens League, Beth Banstra, commented on the importance of the next mayor having the ability to influence, to convince, and to rebuild relations. The Grand Rapids Press views the job as a job which demands diplomacy, and where leadership is a matter of persuading rather than arguing and commanding. I believe that I possess those abilities. I would like to use them as the next mayor of Grand Rapids. Thank you.
That brings to a close our forum for this evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, WYCE, and GRTV, who sponsored this event, we want to thank our two candidates, both for their hard work and for our panelists, for their participation and for their good questions. I also want to thank our studio audience, our viewing audience, and our listening audience for all of their interest and involvement. Thank you so very much, but most of all, remember to vote on November 5, 1991. This will be your opportunity to participate in the democratic process in our city and your chance to let your voice be heard. Thank you all again, and good night.
Thank you very much. Good job.